Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui. I have good news. We've made it through the Sun squaring off with Pluto in Capricorn for the very last time. Pluto is in Capricorn, and the energy has been heavy. It's been relentless. It's been one thing after another. So let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate the fact that we're moving through these major transits. And yeah, they might be challenging, but we're doing it. We're doing it, and we're doing it together. But we all know this hasn't been easy. And now we're in Scorpio season. In the Northern Hemisphere, autumn is taking hold. The leaves are dying. It's getting colder. It's getting darker. And so a lot of these feelings, and really the grief that many of us have been experiencing, is starting to take hold. And Scorpio season is all about transition and transformation and moving through things like change and grief. It's an important part of our annual cycle. But this year, as we go through this collective transition where we say goodbye to Pluto and Capricorn, it's especially important that we don't bypass this energy because there's so much that we can learn from it. Today on the podcast, I talk about moving through grief this Scorpio season. Then stick around for the astrology of the week ahead. I've spoken a lot about Pluto's last stand in Capricorn in our lifetimes, which is what we're currently experiencing. And as a reminder, Pluto has been in Capricorn for the majority of the last 15 years. And in that time, we've done a lot of living. And so much about the world has changed. So a lot of us are probably reflecting on this period of our lives and the things that we have witnessed on a collective level. Capitalism and imperialism and their consequences, the way that corporations have a stranglehold on the United States government and other governments around the world. There's a lot that we've had to live through, to survive, to process. And that's nothing to say of what people living in Palestine or Sudan or Tigray or Haiti or all of the many other places that have suffered from imperialism and colonization, including people here in the United States of America, because we suffer too in our own way. We've seen our police departments, some of which are trained by the Israeli military, become increasingly militarized, increasingly violent against the population. And if you know the history of policing in the United States, you know that it's never not been a racist institution. We've seen multiple pandemics take hold. We've seen public health fail in so many ways as people continue to get very sick and disabled and even die. And we've been asked to suffer in silence, to not make a big deal out of it, to not protest, to not make a scene, to shut up and get back to work. And that's to say nothing about our personal experiences. The changes that we've gone through, the gains that we've made, the losses that we've endured. For people who are conscious and aware and looking for better lives individually and collectively, it's a lot to hold. So as we close this chapter of our lives, I find it really poetic that the final moments of Pluto and Capricorn in our lifetime happen during Scorpio season. Scorpio is all about transition. It's about who you were and who you're becoming, meeting up with one another. Because when you start a new chapter, you have to leave something behind. Astrology is helpful because we knew this transition was coming. We knew that this was going to be a moment where the old meets the new. And yet, it doesn't necessarily always make things easier. Yes, we can prepare. If you've ever known that somebody in your life was going to pass, maybe they were older, maybe they had health issues, yeah, it can be helpful to know that, to give yourself a chance to prepare. But it doesn't make the loss or the grief any easier. And it's the same way with this moment. And because we've been so conditioned during Pluto and Capricorn and well before to accept injustice, to accept being cogs in this imperial machine, to accept mass death and destruction and state violence that is just a normal part of living in the Western world, we may have fallen into the delusion that there isn't anything to grieve. Because this system relies on us bypassing so many levels of what's really happening in order to just get through the day. But the reality is that we have endured a lot of loss, and pretending that we haven't is only preventing us from going through this grief process that is a natural part of being a human being and growing and moving forward through our experiences. We should grieve the lives that have been lost to state violence, to empire, to poverty and hunger, to viruses that had preventative measures that we simply didn't take. We should grieve the versions of ourselves that we thought might exist by now. Maybe the versions of ourselves that were secure financially, that had a place to call home, or maybe the families that we wanted to have, the communities that we wanted to be a part of, we thought we would be a part of by now. And we should grieve the versions of ourselves that we've had to leave behind in order to step into the reality that we exist in now. And it's not that we need to get lost in grief and make a home out of what could have been or what should have been. But if we ignore the losses and the things that have changed, it doesn't help us. It doesn't get us any further. In fact, it disconnects us from ourselves, from other people, from the collective, because we're moving past things that are real and true, that do have an impact, whether we're conscious of it or not. And let's be real. This world is built on bypassing grief, because if we stopped and felt all of this and let it be real, let it hit us, it would be overwhelming. It could bring some of us to our knees. And the system doesn't benefit from that. That is a distraction. We know this because you can lose a child or a partner or a best friend, and you'd be lucky to get a few days off of work for that. The system has shown us what it is and what we are in relationship to it. Human life is nothing up against it. So when we forget to grieve, when we choose not to feel the feelings, we're reinforcing it. We're making it stronger. We're being easy and compliant. And it doesn't benefit us. We stunt our own growth by denying the reality of what is. We let those emotions swirl around in our subconscious, and at the most inopportune moments, they'll appear. Because when you ignore things and you let them fester, who's to say how they're going to manifest and when they're going to rear their head and be seen? So many of us are hurting. And on a subconscious level, so many of us are calling out for that pain to be recognized. Most of us aren't even hearing our own pain and our own grief. We're shoving it down. Imagine a snake shedding its skin because it's time to grow, and instead of letting it happen and accepting the reality of the moment, the snake starts holding on to that dead skin and pulling it closer to its body. It would be counterproductive. It would be foolish. It would be uncomfortable. And for the moment that we're living through, each and every one of us is a snake shedding our skin. We are saying goodbye to a version of ourselves that used to exist, that got us to this point. You know, that shedded skin is not valueless. It had its time. It did its job. But if we want to grow, we have to let go and make space for a new skin to form, a new layer of protection, a new way of encountering the world outside of ourselves. And because this energy has impacted all of us, yes, in different ways, but all of us, there's an opportunity to recognize that this isn't all about us, that the grief is personal, but it's also collective. And that if we come together and share in our grief and perhaps support one another through it, we might find that the things that we have in common, the reflections of how the systems have impacted us on an individual level, might bring us together, might cause realizations that move us forward, that empower us to take action and make the world we're stepping into different and hopefully better. That none of this loss and this pain has to be in vain. And in fact, because we've endured it, it may be our strength, because it does take strength to survive a system that implicates so many of us, that pulls us down so that it might breathe another day. Because the snake of imperialism is also shedding its skin. And there is no room for grief. It is ready to take on a new form as Pluto moves into Aquarius. And that doesn't mean that it will be successful, but the system is going to attempt to take new shapes. And if we haven't grieved what we've lost, are we really keeping in mind how much the system has cost us? Because it has cost us so dearly. With the recent full moon in Aries, this may have been top of mind, because it does cost us all. Whether we are a perpetrator or a victim, we compromise the fullness of our humanity to fit into a system built on dehumanization and destruction. We normalize a culture where human life has debatable value. And as we step into Pluto in Aquarius, there will be existing forces trying to continue business as usual. So it is important that we feel this transition moment, that we recognize the cost that the systems have had for us, and that we grieve those losses so that we might empower ourselves to say that, no, we don't have to live like this. And in fact, these experiences, the pain, has taught us that we can do so much more, that life is about more than just survival and getting through the day. Scorpio energy is the darkness. It's the things that socially we're discouraged from talking about, like death, like loss, like grief, all of which are parts of life, regardless of whether or not we live in a capitalist hellhole. There will always be change. There will always be loss. But with Scorpio energy, we know that that loss doesn't have to be in vain. It doesn't have to go unsupported. We don't have to ignore it. We can ask for help. We can lean on each other to move through and process this grief, loss, and change. And it's not a weakness. In fact, it's a strength to be bold in how you're feeling and the depths of the pain, because that's a reflection of our humanity and our connection and our love. We don't grieve things that we don't feel something about. Feeling your feelings is a sign of strength. It's a sign that you're connected to all of the parts of you, regardless of how socially acceptable it might be. Human beings are remarkably resilient. And some of us have had to be far more resilient than anyone should ever have to be. This world is exhausting to witness, let alone be on the receiving end of some of the worst things possible. And we need to hold space for that reality. And we need to hold ourselves and each other through it, because it's impossible to move through and create change from things that we refuse to recognize, that we are too scared to let see the light of day. So let yourself grieve. Let yourself feel. Let yourself fall apart a bit if that's what you need to do. Give yourself and others grace for the depth of our hurt. Because in the end, grief is really about reaching for connection. Connection to what we've lost, to what we've loved, and for many of us, connection to a future that doesn't hurt so badly. It doesn't have to hurt this bad. Living life is not supposed to be this grotesque, this ugly. We don't have to continue to compromise our humanity to be here and have a human experience. And we can let the lessons that we've learned from this chapter pave the way to a future where we don't have to compromise our humanity anymore. The day that this podcast comes out, we have 27 days left of Pluto in Capricorn. That's right, we are nearing the end of this historic transit. Things will continue to be probably more interesting than we'd like them to be. And Pluto in Capricorn is much heavier energy than Pluto in Aquarius. So The good news is that on an energetic level, there is a bit of relief. But that doesn't change the realities of the challenges that we're going to be facing as Pluto moves into Aquarius, because as I've said before, transits aren't magic wands. They exist in the context of our reality, and we're living in a group project. So without us as human beings taking action and playing a role in what's happening, the changes that a lot of us want to see aren't going to miraculously appear overnight. Though that would be nice, because I know that a lot of us are tired. And some of us were born tired. Some of us were born into circumstances that were fundamentally unjust. And those things need to be addressed and resolved. And it's going to take time and organizing and effort, which is why it's so important that we use this Scorpio season to grieve. And if you've experienced grief before, you know that it doesn't fit neatly into timelines. We will not be done with grieving at the end of the Scorpio season or when Pluto moves into Aquarius. That's just not how grief works. But it's important that we acknowledge it, that we feel it. There is no going around grief. Yeah, you can try to push it down and push it away, but that doesn't make it stop. It doesn't make it disappear. But we have to acknowledge that we're changing personally, collectively, and really feel the weight of this moment that we're in. Because the depth of our grief reflects the depth of our power, that we can hold many truths, many realities of our existence. As we move forward, we can let them empower us. And this week is a great moment to bring that to light as we have the sun in Scorpio. The day this podcast comes out, October 23rd, we'll have the moon conjunct Mars. And of course, Mars is still in Cancer. So on many levels, this is a day where there's a lot of room for emotions and reactivity. And like I said, when we push down our grief and our pain, we tend to be more reactive. So it's a good day to be aware of that within yourself. And when you're dealing with other people out in the world, they just may be more sensitive, more willing to fly off the handle because they haven't processed their emotions, their grief. They may be reacting through old patterns, things that have been long established. And we might find ourselves in that space too. It's a day that, being triggered wouldn't be unusual. But there's nothing wrong with being triggered. What we need to watch for is how we manage our triggers. Are we letting them make decisions for us? Or are we embracing the information that we can get from acknowledging these difficult moments? Much like grief, difficult feelings don't benefit from being pushed away. And the more that we can be comfortable being real with ourselves and other people, with how we're feeling and showing up in the world, the more we're creating a world where it's safer to be a human being, to not have to put on a show and perform and push down the things that make you a human being. And this week, there are a lot of opportunities to move forward, no matter where you're at or what you're feeling. October 23rd is a day where our emotions can really be front and center. And so we can decide whether we want them to run us or we want them to inform us and inform how we process things and move forward and what kinds of decisions we're making. If we're acknowledging our needs instead of pushing them away and pretending that we're okay when we're not, when our body and our mind and our spirit might be screaming and saying, hey, something is hurting here, or something is not right here, or I'm uncomfortable. There may be a need that is going unacknowledged. So it's important to take advantage of the Scorpio season and be brave about how we confront these challenges, because you know what? Feelings are nothing to be afraid of. They can be uncomfortable, but they pass, they move, we move through them. They are not permanent states of being, but they can give us information if we look for it. And acknowledging any discomfort or whatever feelings might be coming up can be really creatively inspiring as well. And on Thursday, October 24th, there is a lot of opportunity for just that. If you're feeling some type of way, it could be a day where having a conversation with somebody that you have an established connection with could actually deepen the relationship. You might learn something from one another, or the conversation might allow you to kind of shape your vision for what's possible for both of you in the future. It's also a day where you might find yourself inspired to do things differently in general, where deeply established patterns, things that feel really comfortable, may benefit from approaching them a little bit differently. And it is important to practice being adaptable, letting yourself try new things, being comfortable, not being so comfortable, because we don't know exactly how every little thing is going to pan out. And when things feel so heightened, anything can feel like a risk. So my advice for this energy is to approach it with a sense of play. Do you remember being a little kid? You know, we didn't know exactly how to behave in every situation or how to react to things that were completely new to us because we were newer human beings. And then we become adults and we think that we have to act like we know everything, and we don't. And in a lot of ways, we're still playing and figuring things out and experimenting. And so it's a good day to lean into that, to remember that part of life is taking calculated risks, is stepping outside of our established routines and patterns. And honestly, that's a repeat theme with a lot of transits that we have this week. If we want Pluto in Aquarius to be about empowering ourselves as human beings and creating a better, more human-centered way of living, we are going to have to get used to stepping outside of our comfort zone. And there is a lot of room for that this week. We need to be open to inspiration, to trusting those little nudges that we get from the universe. Oh, hey, maybe go down that road instead of the road you normally take. Or maybe connecting with groups of people that you haven't previously established a connection with. Adding new things to the routine. Pursuing ideas that in the past may have been too out of the box for us. So all throughout this week, be open to shaking things up. Mentally, physically, spiritually. We learn a lot from experimentation. And yes, it's a risk, but especially this week, and as we move into Pluto in Aquarius on November 19th, we're going to need to do more of that. Sunday, October 27th, things may feel a little bit more serious. We may be feeling like we want to get down to brass tacks. It's another good day to revisit our routines and also, what we want those routines to get us in the long term. Because right now we're building, we've been building, we've been manifesting, whether we've been doing it consciously or not. And so we may become very aware of what we've manifested and perhaps what needs to be tweaked and adjusted in that process. So Sunday is a great day for readjusting, resetting. Very good Sunday energy. And if things are not to your liking, if you're not where you want to be, we really want to avoid picking ourselves apart. I want you to channel that energy into, okay, I'm not where I want to be, but how can I support myself in getting closer to where it is I do want to be. And that energy will continue to come in handy as we head into Monday, October 28th. We have Mars trining off with Neptune and Venus squaring Saturn that day. And then we have the moon making an absolute shit ton of aspects this day. So I think it's going to be a pretty intense Monday. And again, if you're new here, intense doesn't have to be bad. This is a day where it's good to lean on your intuition, and it's important to differentiate between intuition and anxiety, because intuition never has an anxious feeling to it. And this is a day where a lot is probably going to be stirred up emotionally, especially on a collective level out in the world. So it doesn't mean that like everything in your life is going to feel intense, but the vibes are going to have a little bit of a sharpness to it, and things might not be totally clear in the moment. So having some trust, having a little bit of faith in whatever it is that you have faith in, even if it's just yourself and your ability to navigate through difficult moments, that will serve you well. And if there are any frustrations or moments of tension, there is definitely opportunity for creativity within that. You do not have to react in the way that other people might expect you to react, or in the way that you usually react. This is a moment where grace and growth are possible, especially when it comes to our close personal relationships. This is also a good day to let any frustrations that come up inform your vision for your future. If things are not where you want them to be, this is a moment to lean into the imagination and possibilities. This is a moment where those emotions that can be so informative for us, they're going to be giving you information that is there for the taking. Use that information as you craft and refine your vision for yourself and for the collective, because of course we are all part of this collective. And so each of our individual visions for the future are significant in some way, because that's the energy we're putting out into the world. And really every moment is an opportunity to readjust and do things differently. But this week it's especially front and center. And as we move through this transition moment that this Scorpio season is especially, it's a perfect time to really embrace change and growth. And not change and growth for the sake of those things, but because they are necessary, because they are helpful, and because we can learn by doing things differently. So really remain open to inspiration. Now, technically Halloween is not in the next week, but I want to give people a little bit of a heads up. And it's funny because in the morning here on the West Coast, we have the moon moving into Scorpio on Halloween. So, you really can't ask for more Halloween vibes than a Scorpio moon. We also have Mercury in Scorpio, and it'll be trining Neptune. And so this is gonna just add to the Halloween vibes, the mystical, magical moment that Halloween can be. This energy is really giving the veil is thin. And you know what? The reality of it is that the veil is always thin, but it may be more in our awareness at this moment. We may be feeling it on an intuitive level very strongly. So as far as Halloween vibes go, I think this is a pretty good one. Now, if you yourself are not going out and trick-or-treating or going to a party or whatever, this is a great night to do some kind of spiritual ritual of some sort. And maybe for you, it's around grief and this moment of transition that we're in. But it can really be about whatever it is that you feel drawn to on a spiritual level. There's a lot of opportunity to go deep and have some transformative, mystical moments. So I hope that you enjoy it and make the most of it. Astrologer Mackenzie Wollenseen and I are going to be going live on Halloween evening. So if you're looking for somewhere to be, we would love to have you celebrate with us. And of course, we're going to be talking about the astrology because what else is there? So we hope to see you there. And if you are looking for more information about my thoughts on this election season and the astrology of it all, I recorded a very special bonus episode of this podcast just for sponsors of the Patreon. So the election episode will drop in Patreon on Monday, October 28th. So if you're not already a sponsor, why not? You get all kinds of perks, you get more episodes, you get more astrology stuff, and you help support the podcast so that I can grow what I'm doing, so that I can make it better and I can make more stuff for you to enjoy. Memberships start at just $5 a month, so for the price of a cup of coffee, you too can support your local radical astrologer. Sunday, October 27th at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, the Petty Astrology Club is meeting on Zoom. That's where we compare notes, we talk more about the astrology in depth, we share our observations, and I do a little teaching along the way. So if you'd like to join us for any of these events, the links will be in the show notes. I want to thank my sponsors over on Patreon for making this podcast possible. That's it for this week's episode. Tune in next week for even more Petty Astrology.